Alabama and Michigan open the college football playoffs at the granddaddy of them all, with the Wolverines a short 1.5-point favorite. Alejandro Zuniga and John Talty are here to break down the Rose Bowl. Michigan making its third straight playoff appearance, looking for its first win. Jim Harbaugh 1-6 in postseason games since 2015. He's looking to rewrite history after a bizarre season in which he was suspended for 6 games, but his team still went undefeated. Alabama, meanwhile, has won 6 straight playoff semifinal games. So I think this is really interesting, guys, because the players kind of are taking on a similar mindset this season. Michigan taking on an us against the world mentality with their coach suspended. Meanwhile, Alabama players have been upset with the public opinion that Georgia might be taking over Alabama's spot as a dynasty. So, John, you can start us off here. What would a win mean for each program?
Yeah, I think for Alabama, I think you hit on it well there. I think it's the return of the standard. I think when you look at it from a Saban standpoint, I kind of been referring to it as the return of the king. I think it's Nick Saban had ceded some of that part of the throne to Kirby Smart after he won back-to-back national championships. And this was a year that felt, topsy-turvy at times, especially after that early week 2 loss to Texas. So I think for them to kind of not only get back to this moment, but to win against a premier program like Michigan, to be able to get into another national championship game, I think it would reinforce all of those narratives that we've heard in recent weeks of Nick Saban proving he still belongs at the top, and then also Alabama proving that it is still the standard of college football after Georgia really took away a lot of that attention and shine the last couple seasons.
Yeah, this game means everything for Michigan, right? They are the #1 team in the country. They had a choice of where they wanted to play, and they picked the Rose Bowl. The Rose Bowl means so much to Big Ten programs, but it means so much to Michigan in its history, in what it's been able to accomplish there. And there are a lot of narratives that Michigan can end with a win against Alabama. There is, of course, Jim Harbaugh's record in bowl games. He has not won a bowl game at Michigan since his first year as the head coach here. Michigan has lost 2 straight in the college football playoff. It is important for them to get over that hump. It was expected that they'd lose in 21, certainly not expected that they'd lose last year. They're coming in as the #1 team. They believe that they can win. And of course, it's erasing those off-field narratives that have plagued the team throughout the year. Whether it was the sign stealing, whether it was Harbaugh being suspended, whether it's the Big Ten against the SEC, there are a lot of narratives that Michigan can silence by beating Alabama in the Rose Bowl.
Let's get into the X's and O's of this matchup. Michigan's offense led by the FBS rushing touchdown leader Blake Corum and J.J. McCarthy. Bama's defense maybe not getting the attention it once did, but according to the stats, it's still one of the best in the nation. So Alejandro, what's the key matchup on this side of the ball?
Yeah, this is an excellent Alabama defense. And of course, it starts with the 2 outstanding edge rushers and then the secondary, those corners, those safeties. That's going to make it very difficult for Michigan to move the ball, especially through the air. Of course, Michigan's bread and butter is and has been running between the tackles with Blake Corum, who leads the country in rushing touchdowns. It's going to be interesting to see how they are able to move the ball without Zach Zinter. Of course, suffered that gruesome leg injury against Ohio State. They were able to move the ball with decent effect against Iowa in the Big Ten Championship, but it is a retooled offensive line. That will be a key matchup. And then it is a prove-it game for Michigan's receivers, but the couple players I will have circled are Donovan Edwards, A.J. Barner, and Colston Loveland. It's a running back and 2 tight ends. Michigan has felt all season like it can exploit mismatches at the linebacker level, and with such an elite secondary and elite pass rushers, the quick passing game to those targets in the second level will be key for Michigan.
I think sometimes it might feel simplistic, but sometimes the easiest answer is the right one. I think for Alabama, it's making J.J. McCarthy beat them. I think that, we've seen the stats, we've seen how he's played, down the stretch. I think, they're pretty big change from first season to back half of the season. And I think that we've seen Alabama, especially against Georgia recently, do a great job stopping the run and really try to force them to beat you through the air. I think we know what Michigan can do on the ground. Alabama has historically done very well against teams that try to ground and pound. And I think that's where you want to try to force McCarthy to beat you. And I think that's Alabama set up well in that regard. The defensive secondary is very talented, led by 2 guys who are probably going to be first-round picks this year, William McKinstry and Terrion Arnold. Caleb Downs, the freshman safety, might be the best of them all in the long term. So they're set up well. I think you try to pressure the quarterback. I think you try to force him to make some mistakes and not let them kind of own the time of possession with Blake Corum and other guys on the ground.
Michigan's defense is allowing less than 10 points a game, which is just absurd. But they haven't faced a quarterback like Jalen Milroe all season in terms of his rushing ability and his deep ball ability. John Milroe's had some great moments this season. How do you expect him to perform in this one?
Yeah, I mean, he's been the story, I think, of Alabama's season and just the way that he's grown and evolved over the course of the year. Now, there's still going to be some mishaps, some mistakes along the way. I think even in that Georgia game where I thought he played very well and ultimately was able to win the game with his legs down the stretch, there were certainly some open passes that I thought he missed. I don't think we still have seen that perfect Jalen Milroe game, but he's so talented, especially when he gets going. And I thought we saw what I thought was really smart in that Georgia game. I think it was around the third drive or so where Tommy Rees, the offensive coordinator, really started kind of working some of these runs with Milroe, trying to get to the corner. And I think that you have to use him in different ways. I think he's a better passer than people give him credit for, but it's really his running ability that I think makes him so special, makes him such a dangerous quarterback to have to stop. So I think if you can get Milroe going on the ground, I think it opens up different things for them. Of course, you're going to need wide receivers like Isaiah Bond and Jermaine Burton to have big games. But it really starts and ends with Milroe. And if you can get both kind of pieces of him, air and ground, working, I think it's going to be really challenging for Michigan to stop.
Yeah, for Michigan, it's discipline, 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 right? Michigan has not faced a dual threat quarterback of Jalen Milroe's caliber all season. There's just no question about that. So Michigan's strength on the defense is its defensive interior. Chris Jenkins, Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant are three outstanding defensive tackles. They need to be fundamentally sound. They need to be gap sound, and Michigan needs to be able to get pressure on Jalen Milroe while also keeping him in the pocket and also not rushing too many, right? The Michigan secondary will be tested by these receivers, these Alabama receivers. They have big play capability. But the name of the game for Michigan, it has to start with the men up front on the defensive line. You've got to be sound in your rush lanes, play aggressive from the linebacker level, but it's keeping Milroe in the pocket, make him beat you through the air.
All right, this game is going to be picked apart by every fan and media outlet in the country, but you guys are insiders, so you guys have the scoops that no one else has. Alejandro, I'll throw it to you first. What's an underrated storyline that could impact this game that maybe we aren't discussing enough?
Yeah, I'm going to keep my eye on defensive back Will Johnson, particularly through the first few series, because he's going to be returning from a soft tissue injury. So I'm curious to see how close to 100% he's going to be. He is absolutely going to play. There is no question about that. But he got dinged up in practice before the Ohio State game. He still played against Ohio State, had an interception against Marvin Harrison Jr., but missed much of the second half and then missed the Big Ten championship game. If he is out or if he is not at 100%, that is a big blow to the Michigan defense. When he is out, they have to move Mikey Sainristil, their nickel, out to corner, a position that he is good, but he is not elite at the level that he is when he's playing at nickel. So that's a domino. And given what Alabama brings with its skill position players, with those blue chips, with its deep threat, it is imperative for Michigan to be at 100%. And Will Johnson at corner, a position where Michigan does not have a ton of depth, that is a guy to keep an eye on early on in the Rose Bowl.
For me, Grace, I think it's humans versus computers. And what I mean by that is the computer models love Michigan in this game. They're a favorite, not a huge favorite, but they are the favorite. But they also just, a lot of the different models you can run and that, gamblers like to use are all just love Michigan. Now, on the flip side, I've talked to, coaches and former players and other people around the game, and they all love Alabama in this game. And so I think it's an interesting contrast of those two things. We'll see ultimately what ends up playing out. But I think the human aspect of it really likes Alabama, I think, for two reasons in this game. I think one is just Nick Saban, and you mentioned this earlier, Grace, has a great track record of winning these kind of games. They lost the first semifinal in 2014, Ohio State. Nick Saban's won all of his other playoff semifinals since then. You're banking on the fact that giving Nick Saban a month to prepare for a team more often than not works out well for Alabama. And again, I think from a historical standpoint, when Alabama plays teams that try to win on the ground, Alabama has been very successful in stopping them. I think coaches like Alabama's ability to slow down the run, force J.J. McCarthy to beat them, and then ultimately Alabama can win a game like that. So it's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening out in California. But right now you're seeing computers versus humans.
Yeah, right now the humans do love Alabama. That spread opened at 2.5. It was immediately bet down to 1.5, but with a spread that tight, it can go either way. Should be a good one. John and Alejandro, thanks so much. Enjoy the game. Remember, the Rose Bowl kicks off at 5 Eastern, January 1st. For more game coverage, you can check out Bama 24/7 and the Michigan Insider. They're keeping you up to date on all your Crimson Tide and Wolverines football and recruiting news all year long.